years ago, I sat on a panel. It was actually for a British Council thing to select the UK Young Performing Arts Entrepreneur of the Year. At the time, everybody who was on the shortlist for this was working really pretty well in the sort of small scale. Many came from what I suppose we mostly kind of call the independent sector. It was really fascinating, and everyone on the shortlist was impressive in their own way. One of those people is in this room today, and she's more than gone on to demonstrate her potential creative acumen and entrepreneurial flair. If I had a spare fiver, I would give it to her. But what was clear from the interview process that I find absolutely fascinating was that there did seem to be an absolute gulf in approach between those working in the subsidised sector and those in the commercial sector. On one hand, there was this chap who had, in order to get his company going, had maxed out his credit card because a bank wouldn't give him a loan. This was a guy who absolutely saw opportunity everywhere. And on the other, there were producers, really good producers, whose idea of being an entrepreneur was being excellent, being really, really excellent at raising money through funding applications to ACE, trusts, and foundations. Actually, I was really fascinated by the credit card guy. Popped along to see one of his shows. It was Picnic Theatre. Nothing against Picnic Theatre. I like a bit of Chardonnay with my theatre. I really, really wanted it to be fabulous. Unfortunately, actually, it wasn't. It really made me think, well, what if we could put him with the form fillers together, you know, and what glorious shows they might produce if one's attitude to financial risk and the other's approach to artistic risk came together to support each other. Of course, it may have ended in bankruptcy. But you know, why shouldn't good things, why shouldn't good art make money? I think in theatre, and I think particularly actually in the sort of independent sector that, you know, I feel, you know, really very close to, that we're still quite squeamish about the idea of people who not only have a demonstrable passion for the arts, but are also capable of seeing the arts as a business like any other. Despite the war horses, despite the Matildas, bigger scale of course, but we still have a cultural mindset that the successful must mean it's rubbish, that commercial is a dirty word. So, anyone for Beckett in the West End? Of course, actually, it's already been done. But what about forced entertainment at the London Palladium? I recently read a blog of The Guardian, you can look it up if you want to, suggesting that maybe, you know, that West End producers hadn't quite stepped up to the table in the good years of subsidy, instead folding their arms and letting the subsidised sector do a lot of the work. But I don't think this is about blame, but about attitudes. And I do think that sometimes in the indie sector, there are some really strange attitudes. Quite recently, I actually sat in a discussion group where an independent theatre maker, somebody who I actually really admire, sort of really physically shivered at the prospect of just the idea of getting involved in any way with commercial producers. It's daft, because it plays to the notion that somehow it's nobler for everybody to survive on crumbs of funding, rather than nurturing the best possible environment for artists to create. How often have you heard somebody from the independent sector sort of say, well, in the end, we had to make the show that we had the money to make, rather than saying, this is the show we wanted to make, this is how much it will cost, and we went out and raised it. It's also daft, because there's an awful lot of work out there with commercial potential that's currently being produced using subsidy. Subsidy that could perhaps be better used supporting the genuinely risky, the grassroots, the community, and the participatory work that simply will not exist without subsidy. Theatre makers always look for where the money is. And in terms of subsidy, well, in the 1980s it was the dole. I always remember Ursula Martinez telling me that the government invested in her as an artist to lie on a kind of hammock in Pepper for 10 years on the dole. But goodness, the government had a very good return, thank you very much, in all the tax she'd subsequently paid. More recently, I think kind of, we felt that investment would come via the Arts Council. But there are plenty of other ways that work can be funded. I mean, after all, Vicky Featherstone has done a cat show walk for Prada. Chris Good, about as an independent and maverick theatre maker as you can get, has been funded by Pizza Express. I recall him telling me that it was incredibly liberating not to have to fill in endless forms about projected outcomes and achieved objectives. Has that Belgian company, who I know how to spell but I don't know how to pronounce their name, has it suffered because they've got into bed and are having a threesome with commercial producer Richard Jordan and the subsidised drum in Plymouth? Actually, I'd suggest that it creates more work for everyone involved. I certainly think that one of the things, and I was kind of interested with some of the things that we heard today and about the Matthew Bourne work, maybe ACE itself could find more ways to be entrepreneurial, maybe offering loans in some instances, or making sure that on successful investments that the money goes back into the pot. Listen, in recent years there's been an absolute explosion of theatre makers. I mean, it's kind of what makes my job really, really exciting, particularly on the small scale. But we've also seen what I think is a much more unsung explosion of young creative producers, not all of whom see it as their aim to fill Drury Lane, but who are equally happy working between the subsidised and commercial sectors, and who see opportunities lurking in the tracks between them. We need these people. We should cherish them and be thankful that there are more and more of them. And rather looking askance at them, I think the independent sector needs to be actively seeking out these collaborations. We've got much better in recent years about having collaborations with each other and collaborations between the big buildings and smaller companies. But what about more collaborations between those in the subsidised sector and those who are working in the commercial sector? I'd like to see quite a lot of speed dating. I think that would help. In the current climate, our need for cultural entrepreneurs is greater than ever. We have as much need of the organisational energy, corporate skills, original ideas, and a willingness to take risks as we do of the creative energy of the rehearsal room and the stage. Nobody here needs me to tell you that when funding dries up, so does the quality and riskiness of work on our stages. Some work will always require subsidy, and it should be given. But I think that theatre is over-reliant on funding, or investment, if you prefer, from the Arts Council, from trusts and foundations, and from local authorities. And that means it's vulnerable. With government spending likely to continue to drop in coming years, with local authority money under big pressure, it's time to stop despising cultural entrepreneurship and start talking about the challenges facing theatre, what we're going to do about it, and how we're going to work together. So let's start the conversation. Thank you very much.